Hello, my name is Kathy Lynch. I'm the Republican State Committee woman for the 1st Middlesex District, and I am the host for the Second Opinion show. Today I have my guest here, Anthony DeLeo, and he is here to talk to us about the ballot initiative. On May 2nd, there will be a question in Westford on the ballot to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. So people have a choice at the ballot on May 2nd. And of course, there's early voting as well. And for the viewers, I'd like to read the question first. The question is, shall the Westford Select Board declare the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day, superseding local references to Columbus Day, and recommend that it be observed by the people of Westford with appropriate exercises in the schools and otherwise, to acknowledge the history of genocide and discrimination against Indigenous peoples, and to recognize and celebrate the thriving cultures and continued resistance and resilience of Indigenous peoples and their tribal nations. So welcome, Anthony. What do you think about this question that's going to be on the ballot?
Well, I would vote no on that ballot question. I think that it is, it misrepresents a lot of historical facts. I've read the documents that preceded the actual wording of the question, and there's a lot of claims in there to justify why this change should be made. And at least in my opinion, those claims are either historically inaccurate or they take things out of context and misrepresent them. And on that basis, I think that the reason that they want to make this change should be reconsidered because it's built on faulty foundation.
There's a lot of people, I think, agree with you. What do you think about you know, not only is it a fair question, but the fact that on Columbus Day we had a celebration in the town common.
We did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a great day. We actually were afraid because it was raining a little bit just before we got started, and the rain stopped just as we were starting. But it was a very good day. We got a good turnout. People were very enthusiastic, and we had a fun time. We had a number of speakers that talked about some of the historical background behind Columbus and Columbus Day, and we ended up, you know, singing some songs and listening to some music from the time. So it was a really good time.
I remember you were the MC. I was there.
Yes.
We raised the flag, the Santa Maria flag.
That's right. That's right.
I remember we had speakers from the Knights of Columbus, the Sons and Daughters of Italy, the Italian American Alliance. We had a classical educator from Westford there, and we had a reverend from Christian Citizenship Ministries, and a representative of Camp Constitution,
yes,
and the Sons of the American Revolution.
Yes,
so there are quite a few groups that are recognized and that enjoy Columbus Day and don't want to see it disappear.
Yes, as do I.
And that's why you're here today.
And that's why I'm here.
Well, regarding Westford residents, has this been introduced before? And if so, how did it go?
It's been brought forward to the Westford residents 3 times before. There was a special town meeting in 2020, and it was voted down at that point in time. And then there was a questionnaire initiative that was undertaken in the spring of 2021, and over 62% of the respondents voted to keep Columbus Day. They brought it back then for a 3rd time with a special hearing in front of the town board in October of that year. And about 80% of the people who got up and spoke were in favor of keeping Columbus Day. So we feel that, at least based on what has been asked of the citizenry so far, that the majority of the population would like to keep it the way it is.
You know, it's been introduced, as you just said, 3 times. It makes you wonder why they keep coming back. It's almost like Westford residents have spoken already.
I think they have, and I can't explain to you why they want to bring it back. It seems like that they just don't like the answer they're receiving, and they just keep trying until they get the answer that they want.
Well, I guess we'll see on Election Day, won't we?
Yes, hopefully.
So there are 3 objections that I thought about with people who are proposing this change. So I'll read through them quickly, and then after, I'd like you to address each one at a time. Mm-hmm. So the 3 questions that I know about are that Columbus's voyages were once of conquest and genocide. The second was that Columbus initiated the transatlantic slave trade. And the third one is that European colonizers of the Americas destroyed Native American culture for future generations. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the first one, that Columbus's voyages were ones of conquest and genocide. Is that true? Tell us about that.
No, Columbus's voyages were not ones of conquest or genocide. Columbus, his major objective was to find a westward route to the Far East. The traditional eastern route had been closed off by the Ottoman Empire, and so the Europeans were looking for a way to continue trade with the Far East and China in particular. So his primary purpose was to find a western route to Asia. And he had secondary purposes. He was a very devout Christian, and he was interested in spreading Christianity where he could, and those were probably the 2 biggest objectives that he had. There was some interest in monetary gain that the crown had, but the reason why they were interested in that was because they were trying very hard to regain Jerusalem, which had been taken from them during the Crusades. So the primary reasons were ones of trade and of religion, and had nothing to do with conquest. Columbus, as a matter of fact, befriended the Indians. When he landed, he made friends with the king of the Taino tribe, which was the tribe that he met there. He adopted the king's son, and went to great lengths to try to befriend and get along with the Indians and make sure his sailors did. And as a matter of fact, and I'll read it from his log, he actually wrote about dealing with the natives. They should avoid as they would death, annoying or tormenting the Indians, bearing in mind how much we owe these people. So he was very conscious of the fact that he wanted to get along with them, because in his mind he wanted to try to set up trading posts like what they had in Genoa, and so he wanted to be on good terms with the native population. Now there were times where people on his crew, especially in his second journey, where they did mistreat the Indians. And as good a sailor as Columbus was, he was not a very good administrator, and had a very difficult time administering the population in the colonies. But he continued to want to befriend and get along with the Indians. And when he saw what was going on, he struggled with exactly what to do. And he wrote in his journal again, and I'll only read part of it because it's a very lengthy piece. It said, "I am very discontented, for it seems to me a disservice to God, but I can do nothing about it. For these reasons, it would be of great advantage to have some devout friars here, rather to reform the faith in us, the Christians, than to give it to the Indians. I shall never be able to administer just punishments." And I'll paraphrase the rest of it. What he says is that the only thing he can think to do is to take the people that are misbehaving and send them back to Spain and bring a whole nother crew. In fact, he did try to administer punishment, and was brought back to Spain in chains and stripped of all of his titles because he was punishing Spaniards for mistreating the Indians. So there was, if you look at the historical record, many years later, there was conquest and mistreatment of the native populations. That was primarily done when the crown changed hands and King Charles took the crown, and he sent Cortez over to the Americas. And at that point in time, there was a committed agenda to try to colonize and take over the colonies. And there was genocide that took place at that time. One must also remember that at that point in time, the other European nations were also in the Americas. So the French were here, the English were here, and there was a lot of competition among them over what parts of the Americas each one of them would control. So there were a lot of factors that went into what happened, and there was mistreatment, there was genocide that occurred in those later years, but they were not a direct result of Columbus. They weren't Columbus. They came as a result of the change in the Royal Crown and the competition with the other European states.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your history about this. You seem very knowledgeable. Where did you learn all this?
Oh, there are a number of scholarly historical books and that are written about Columbus and about the history of the time, most of them are quite voluminous because there's a lot of history that occurred at that point in time. The colonization of the Americas, the voyages to the Americas by all of the different nations in Europe. There was a lot that went on, both publicly that we know about and behind the scenes in each of the houses that ran each of the countries. So there are a number of very good texts that are written to describe the history that occurred during that period.
That's great. Well, the second question that comes up a lot, or the claim, is that Columbus initiated the transatlantic slave trade.
There you go.
So tell us about that.
I take opposition to the statement because he did not initiate any of that. As I said, he worked very hard to try to stay on good terms with the native population, and in fact did have an African American on his first ship, on his first voyage with him, that was actually his servant. He did not initiate any slave trade. There was no slave trade that occurred on any of his 4 voyages. There was some migration, or I shouldn't say migration, some taking of Africans to the colonies that occurred after Queen Isabella's death and King Charles started to take over. The people who were colonizing the islands were having a difficult time with the native population, primarily because of the diseases that the Indians were getting. They were not immune to the European diseases. And so they brought over a small number, 50 and 100 Africans, to work in the sugar cane fields, and then the magistrates began demanding more and more people because they wanted to expand the fields and also mine the minerals that were on the islands. And King Charles made the decision to bring over African Americans to do that. So yes.
So African Americans, not Indians.
Not Indians,
yeah.
No. They were African Americans that were brought over. The Indians also worked in the fields and in the mines, but I was interpreting your question to mean the African Americans that were brought over. But I think again, a little bit of a misrepresentation, because it was not Columbus nor any part of his 4 voyages that were related to these things that happened, 10, 15 years after his voyages, when King Charles took over and all of the policies changed.
Mm-hmm. And the third claim is that European colonizers of the Americas destroyed Native American culture for future generations.
Yeah, that's a point of contention that that you could discuss a lot. I must say that my wife has Indian blood in her, so I'm somewhat sympathetic to the plight of the Indians. There was, as we talked about earlier, there was mistreatment of the Indians by the countries that colonized the Americas, and It really, I think you can divide it, the big parts, you can divide it into two. One is the conquest and the destruction of the Indian tribes that were in South America, and that was primarily done by the Spaniards and the Portuguese with a little bit of French, and those in North America, which were primarily the French and the English. But at least as far as the North American Indians are concerned, to me at least, the biggest part that influenced how we handled or how we treated the American Indians didn't occur until the 1800s, when they were all put on reservations. But I think that you know, the Native American Indian and all of the Indian cultures should be represented, and they should be honored, just like every other culture that has influenced our American culture, and we should respect them as we do all of the other cultures that we have.
And thank God we don't have slavery.
Yes.
Or, you know, obvious slavery going on. Where did all this start, in your opinion? I mean, this demonization of Columbus and you know, just pushing aside all the great work that he did as a navigator and explorer. Mm-hmm. But where do you think all this started?
It's hard to say exactly when it started. What we can talk about is when the first texts and manuscripts were written describing these points. And the first one that I was able to find was in the late 1800s, written by a Marxist historian who brought out some of these arguments. There were several other historians that followed him that built off of his arguments. And the thing was finally popularized in the 1990s by a BU professor, Howard Zinn, who wrote a book, The History of America. And one must note that that book and Howard in particular have been criticized by every side of the political spectrum for what he has done in that book. There are many instances where he has misrepresented the facts, where he has directly omitted facts and included partial facts to promote his point of view. And I won't read it, but he does have has been interviewed and asked these questions, and he basically said that his objective he is not intending to be objective, but but as a historian he is proper in selecting those items which he presents to represent his point of view.
Now, what makes you, in particular, very interested in this topic? Is it because you're Italian? Because I know the Italians really revere Columbus, and they're the reason why we have a Columbus Day, right?
Well, yeah. Many Italians and Italian organizations do revere Columbus and look at that day as a day of honor. And in fact, Columbus Day was first recognized in the late 1800s as a way of recognizing the contributions of Italian Americans who had been severely mistreated prior to that when they came to this country. So there's a lot of significance to Columbus Day in the Italian-American community. There's a part of me who also honors that, but to me the bigger reason is because I think the justification for this change doesn't exist, and the arguments that are being put forward are misrepresentations of the historical facts. I personally would like very much to recognize and honor the Native American culture, and if we need to have a day for them, let's have a day for them. But there's no need to tear down our history and eliminate Columbus Day and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day. Let's find another day that's suitable. The month of November has been set aside as Indigenous Peoples Month, yeah. And there's no reason why we can't have a separate day to recognize their contributions to this country.
Well, we also have Friday after Thanksgiving.
Friday after Thanksgiving.
So there's a day already designated for
Yes.
Native Americans and a whole month of November.
Yes.
So, and I'm in agreement with you. I think that why do we have to replace one with the other?
Yes.
That's kind of like what a bully does. And we don't want that.
Yes.
We can celebrate both because both do deserve recognition
Yes.
for their contribution to history and to our civilization. So where do we go from here, Anthony?
Well, I think the most important part is that the people of Westford need to make their voices heard. As we discussed, this is the 4th time that this proposal has been made. It has been turned down the 3 other times. And we encourage all of the members of the Westford population to come out and vote no against this proposal on May 2nd.
And you are aware of a Facebook page, right?
We have a Facebook page. We have a series of flyers which we will be distributing. So if people are interested in getting more information, both about what we've discussed here today, as well as some of the other items surrounding Columbus Day, they can go to those pages.
Do you remember the name of the Facebook page?
I don't.
Save Columbus Day in Westford.
Oh, Save Columbus Day in Westford. There you go.
Not a hard one to remember for folks. And is there a way people can contact you if they have any questions or want to discuss anything further with you?
I think they can, if they would like to, they can contact me directly. I'm in the Westford phone book. On Vose Road, so they can contact me directly, either by letter or by phone.
Is there anything that you feel like we missed today that you wanted to also share with the viewers?
I don't think so. I think we've covered all of the important items. I think that again, the people of Westford need to understand that the justification for this is faulty, and B, that this is the 4th time this proposal is being put before the Westford citizens, and again, to repeat, we encourage everybody to come out and vote no against ballot question 3.
That's right. So I want to thank you for coming today to give another point of view. There are people that are even in town that are in prominent positions that are pushing to replace Columbus Day. So you've given the other side of the story, and I think that's really very helpful for viewers. They can make their own decisions regarding this. And I remember looking at the survey comments, and 62% of the people did not want this.
Right.
So let's see if we can carry this through the election again. It's still going to be a federal holiday, regardless of what people want to do here in Westford. And I think 94% of the towns in Massachusetts
94% is
have not replaced Columbus Day.
Yes.
So that's a significant number that really just want to keep both. I remember when I grew up, we learned about Columbus. I mean, it was a great thing. He explored. I remember there were poems and songs about him sailing the ocean blue, and it's a part of our history, American history.
I think it's important. I think it's important to recognize his accomplishments. Mm-hmm. He did link 2 disparate continents and form what we now know as a world global connected entity. And for that he should be recognized because he was the first one to do that. People should understand that his accomplishments can be recognized, and we can also speak badly of the people that mistreated the Indians and did the bad things that happened after his voyages. Both can be recognized, and I think the important part of history is not to exclude any of this. History is very complex, and it's influenced by a lot of factors, not the least of which are cultural factors and religious factors and political factors, as well as ambition. No one thing, no one person can be isolated and said to have caused everything that follows after him, because there are a number of events and things that happen that he had no control over, and we need to understand not that they happened, but why they happened, and to me that's the most important part.
Also, Anthony, I'd like to say that everyone's imperfect and everyone's
Yes.
capable of atrocities, and we don't want to go there. We don't condone it. We want to prevent that.
Absolutely.
But we also have to remember that the Indians weren't perfect either.
The Indians were not perfect.
And I even heard that there was cannibalization there.
Yeah, if you look at, again, the history, the Native Indians throughout all the Americas were not innocents in all of this. The Mayans and the Aztecs all practiced human sacrifice through to 1600, and the Europeans were aghast when they witnessed this. There was cannibalism, there was slavery, there were wars, all of the things that you see everywhere in the world. They're part of human culture. But specifically related to Columbus, when he came here on his first voyage, he left to go back to Spain and brought with him 5 natives with him. When they arrived in Spain, Queen Isabella freed all of them. She did not want any of them to be slaves. Columbus, as I mentioned earlier, adopted one of them, who was the king's son. When he returned on his second voyage, he had left behind 39 sailors when he returned to Spain. When he returned on the second voyage, all 39 of them were dead. And they had presumably they had been taken by the second tribe that was on the island, which were cannibals. And so I think that, again, we need to look at everything in context, because everybody played a role in the events that happened.
Right, and the control we have is now, that's what's available to us.
Yes.
We can't go back and rewrite history,
Yes.
nor should we.
Yes.
We should learn from history.
Learn from history.
So again, thank you very much for giving another perspective. And
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask our viewers, if you're ever wondering if it's too one-sided or you haven't heard another point of view, just get a second opinion.
Absolutely.